Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Wednesday, June 25th edition of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, Teddy Panos, coming here from the WellPoint Studios here in beautiful, historic, and still hot downtown Lowell, though going to be maybe 10 degrees cooler than yesterday, so, you folks may actually like it today. But, I was thinking things could have been red hot in this studio today, but I decided to give former Lowell Mayor Bill Samaras a little bit of a break and not talk about last night's council meeting and the Lowell High School construction budget.
My favorite subject. Yeah, I don't know why.
Yes, indeed. Because we've got a special guest joining us here on our Wednesday podcast. He is the Director of Elections in the City of Lowell, and it's his first visit here to the WellPoint Studios. Will Rosenberry. How are you, Will? Welcome.
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Hey, now, listen, if you do want to talk about Lowell High School, I'm not going to stop.
No, I'm not going to tread on that.
Get into that now,
Outside my wheelhouse. My kids will go there someday. And
it's amazing what he doesn't mind you do.
Right. I guess the question is, will it be completed in 8 years when my daughter is attempting?
Well, yes. I would say yes, but I'm starting to wonder.
It'll be completed.
You've got enough of a cushion. You've got 8 years. You're good.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Well, you've got more pressing issues on your mind than having a school ready for your kids, because election season is really creeping up. I'm looking at it. It's June 25th. We're less than 2.5 months now, or about 2.5 months from a preliminary election that it looks like you will have to conduct. And then, of course, right 2 months later, less than 2 months later, you have to turn around and throw in a general election, put it together. And last time people heard from you publicly, before everybody started focusing on high schools and Markley and diesel generators, there were some unanswered questions about elections. So we want to see if we can get some of those answers and talk about all the things to get people geared up for how they actually will vote and what goes into that, because it's not as willy-nilly as some people think. So
right.
Excited to have that discussion with Will Rosenberry and with former Mayor Bill Samaras. Let me just quickly thank my Daily Pulse sponsors. We've got Ray Booten. He is a licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. He is a certified appraiser in both of those states as well. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, a business, or a commercial property, you need to get in touch with Ray Booten. And you can find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. Easy enough website to remember, realestaterayBooten.com. Thanks as well to our friends at WellPoint. WellPoint is the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Thanks to WellPoint. Thanks to Ray. We'll thank our other sponsors in a little bit, but let's get right to it with Director Rosenberry here. We got to give you your official title now. But all right. First things first, is the election calendar now 100% set?
Yes, the election calendar is set with the exception of the early voting dates. So for municipal election, early voting in person is optional. Now, having said that, I expect there to be early voting. I expect there to be at least a week of early voting prior to the preliminary as well as the election. It's just a matter of we are trying to determine exactly where we're holding preliminaries and what's going to be the best fit for September. But I would expect there to be an early voting period of a week prior to each event.
Okay, so interesting you say that. You expect there to be. Aren't you the boss? Aren't you the guy
Correct.
who makes this call?
Right.
Who makes this decision?
So I wish it was my decision, but it is not mine alone. So it is a recommendation from the election commissioners and then a vote by the city council.
Okay.
So the election commission, it's a 4-member board, bipartisan board. They have not finalized their recommendation yet. We were also, of course, we're toying with different locations or exploring different locations. Unfortunately, and this is the same kind of thing with the polling places, that's also outside of my control per se. So, we had discussed some polling place changes in a city council subcommittee meeting back, I think, in April. Nothing has really come to fruition. It is up to the council to propose those changes.
All right, so that's interesting. So you could theoretically map out a schedule, including early voting, mail-in voting, pick all the locations, and you could get overruled. You could tell, no, scratch that, because whether it be the election commission or the council says, we don't like this.
Correct. I mean, I am just merely charged with administering the election, and there are legislative bodies of cities and towns are granted certain powers under state law to do certain things. Election Commission has certain powers as well. When the Votes Act was passed in 2022, That's what they envisioned. A recommendation for local election. It's 50% of the election commissioners who recommend it to the legislative body, in this case, our city council.
Well, the thing is, the city councilors do have to face their constituents.
Correct.
And that's where the complaints come in. You know, the traffic was such, I can't get there because of the traffic. There's no parking.
Right. And there is
not enough sun.
There is clearly consensus that we want to have early voting in the city of Lowell in person. We will be opting into it. It is just a matter of figuring out exactly the details there.
And when you say early voting, that also includes mail-in voting.
That is correct. Well, so early voting in person is for municipal elections. It's an opt-in. Vote by mail is available, unless a city council were to opt out of vote by mail for municipal elections. I don't see any desire to opt out. Vote by mail is available. Folks can request their mail-in ballots now. They can visit mailmyballotma.com. You can apply now, and as soon as I have the ballots ready, we'll be filling those requests.
But there is a cost in a municipal election to the in the state election, if I'm not mistaken. All the mailings, the Secretary of State gives you the 70-cent stamp or how much it costs.
Well, so no, I mean, there is an initial cost. We do provide the outgoing postage on all the ballots in the state election. There is, however, after the election, early voting, the vote by mail, and in person have both been declared unfunded mandates by the state auditor's office. So there is some reimbursement that we get for our early voting. For this past September-November cycle, we got about $98,000 back from the state auditor's office.
What does each cost the city? And by that I mean the early in-person voting and the mail-in voting. What is the cost to that?
Sure, I don't have the exact figures. I mean, maybe it's $98,000, but not really. I mean, so the in-person early voting, with regards to a state election, because of the parameters that we have to be open. The moment the city hall opens, and we have to have the polls, the early voting location open until city hall closes. So that does incur an overtime charge for my staff, who has to come in an hour early, stay an hour late, roughly to open and resolve all the ballots at the end of the night, plus the added expense of having to hire poll workers. So we use poll workers in the early voting location. The vote by mail, I mean, in a presidential election, expensive, incurs a lot of overtime just because of the need to process everything, get everything out and done. And then there's a cost, the postage cost of mailing all these ballots. But a lot of those costs are reimbursed.
So if you know me, you kind of know where I'm getting to. Do we need both? If we're gonna have mail-in voting, do we really need to pick up the extra whatever it costs, thousands, 10,000s for early in-person voting if we're going to do mail and and then vice versa as well?
Sure. I mean, and that's not for me to say. I mean, the law provides for both. And as I said, the city council or board of selectmen in Chelmsford, or any municipality could opt out of offering vote by mail. I imagine that some have out there. I'm aware that some have, and some do not choose to offer in-person early voting for their municipal elections. I think these are ways to expand the franchise. One of the concerns with our municipal elections, less so than presidentials or state elections, is low turnout. So however we can give folks the opportunity to vote and increase turnout and get people to participate, I think that's a good thing.
Teddy brings up, I think, a good point. I think what your office will see is that there'll be councils or what have you, various communities complain about having to spend the money, extra money on voting, and look for ways to save costs.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, why don't people vote?
Right, correct. So, I mean,
we don't have this.
If you're talking about a per ballot cost on an in-person early voting period, perhaps it is not cost effective. I don't know if, like the post office, are we supposed to be making money with voting? Not necessarily. But Yeah, I mean, in some cities and towns are faced with very tight budgets, and I don't know what their plans are, how to do vote by mail and early voting.
But you, I know you're not a political position, but you're okay with it. For you, you'd like to see more people vote as an elections director.
Correct. And otherwise, I think it's a safe and secure system that's inaccurate, and that's my primary concern.
So that's going to be my follow-up, because I guess it's arguable whether we've increased voting or haven't based on the turnout.
Correct.
But in terms of logistically putting on an election, it's far more complicated today than it was 10, 15 years ago, right? Because
it is a lot of work.
You've got a lot of deadlines that you have to meet, and mailing these things, while it sounds easy, anyone who's ever mailed an electric bill and had it lost, the check's been lost in the mail or whatever, you know that there are issues with whether it's mail or anything else. And you have enough issues on election day itself, right? A machine jam, something. So is it a burden that could be eased and should be eased in some way, shape, or form?
So yes, I mean, there are ways that they could reform the Votes Act to streamline things. For instance, in a presidential election year, that vote by mail postcard, it goes out to voters 3 times in a presidential election year. In January, when it went out, I think the state captured about a million vote by mail folks. Or maybe a little bit less. The second round, you just get a small portion of new applicants. The third round, by the time they get it in October, even fewer folks return it. So that is a huge expense to the state, and people get upset about getting multiple mailers, but that's what the law requires.
All right. Let's take a look at the calendar for a quick second. So we're kind of in the midst of this election calendar right now. June 10th, 15 days ago, nomination papers were released. Candidates come in. They have until July 22nd to submit it with the signatures.
Correct.
People still not sure. How many signatures do I need, and is that number different if I'm running at large or district?
Sure. There seems to be some confusion about this out there. I'm not sure why. Well, I've kind of figured out why, but for municipal elections in the city of Lowell, it is 150 certified signatures from registered voters in the city, and that is regardless of where they live and regardless of what office you seek. So if you are seeking a district seat, council, or school committee, yes, you need to have resided in the district for a year prior to the election. You need to be a registered voter in the district. However, your signatures can come from anywhere.
So if I am running it, and I'll just pick the acre as an example, District 7, there are 3 candidates there. I need to get 150 signatures, same as the at-large candidates. Do I have to get those signatures from District 7? Can I go out to Belvedere where it's voter rich? Can I go to the Upper Highlands, etc.?
Yes, you may. The signatures can come from anywhere in the city, regardless of what you're running from. I think the confusion stems from there was a bill that was sent to the legislature and did not ultimately get passed that would have sought to change the signature requirement. It would have reduced the signature requirement for those district, city council, and school committee seats, and also required those signatures to come from the district. It did not pass, so that is not the law. So we're going upon, we are acting under the auspices of the special act that calls for them to be gathered at large.
All right. Now you need to get those 150 signatures, but there's a catch. There's a word, certified.
Correct.
Signatures.
Correct.
So we actually had this happen in 2023. There was a candidate who put in 151, 152 or whatever, but a few of them were not certified.
Sure. Right.
What has to be the case for a signature to be certified? And for any candidates who are watching this, what should they watch out for to say, you may have gathered this signature, but it's not going to count if you turn it in, especially at 5 p.m. on July 22nd.
Right. So the standard for certification is that it is the name and address of a registered voter here in Lowell. No nicknames are acceptable. So, 2 Williams here. I could write Will Rosenberry. He could write Bill Samaras. The elections office would certify that signature. We're required to certify a printed name as well. We do our best to decipher the script names. We usually look them up by address. So if you look up my address and I can decipher a W and an R and I'm the only WR at that address, we're going to certify it.
Okay, so I was curious about my signature. We were told when I was growing up, make your signature in a way that it can't easily be forged. So my signature, Theodore Penagin, 23 letters. You can maybe decipher the T, the P, but if somebody's looking at my signature in the Chelmsford clerk's office, who the hell is this guy? They don't know me in Chelmsford.
Yeah. But they might look you up by address, and if you're the only, if the T and the P can be deciphered, and you're the only TP at your address, they would assign that. They would likely assign that to you and certify that signature. Now, the signatures are, however, available for review and available for challenge. You could object to signatures, and there would be a hearing before the election commission, and we'd see what they say. My recommendation to these candidates is get more signatures than are required and turn them in early. So if there are problems with your nomination papers, they can be identified early and you can get more signatures.
It really is a simple process.
But when
that's what you got to do. That
when people screw it up, it's a disaster. I want everybody on the ballot. I don't want a write-in campaign. That adds additional levels of complexity. So let's make sure the candidates get on the ballot.
And we know in their spring elections, Tewksbury actually did have a signature challenge process go on. You mentioned Get Extra. Is there an advice, like a standard number? I know, like when you send out wedding invitations, if you invite like 200 people, they always say, well, 10 to 15% won't show up, so you get a function hall for 175.
I think amongst the councilors, for me, it was 200.
200
was the
200 raw signatures, is what we call it. Yeah, that's a comfortable margin. What I've seen, I've been not certifying signatures, but looking at signatures for 20 years at the state. The experts tell me, the paid signature gatherers, for instance, who do the ballot questions, they tell me they get about 80% rate. Now, I would say that the papers that we've certified in our office are much higher. I think the candidates in Lowell have been going to events that are voter rich.
Sure.
It's a very small number. You could knock on 100. You could knock on 75 doors and get 150 signatures. So, actually, what we've seen is a very high certification rate so far.
And I've heard, I cited the case where a gentleman turned in like 152, and kind of literally at the last minute. Others bring them in gradually. They'll bring you 50 a week, 100 a week.
Right.
From an election office perspective, what's easier for you to have to do this every single day, drop what you're doing, which includes, you've got to worry about mailings and voter rolls every day. Would you rather, 20 some odd candidates come in every couple of days, or would you rather they come in on the last day?
I really have no personal preference. There's no amount of work that I'm unwilling to do. So I recommend that people file piecemeal, file bit by bit as you get them. You do not want to have them blow out the window while you're driving down the road or spill coffee on them. Get them out of your possession and
Bank
into ours.
them, as they say in the biz.
They'll go in the vault where they're going to be secured. We make multiple parallel records. Why not get them in? I have seen candidates at the state level who lost their papers and didn't turn them in, and then they have to do write-ins.
Oh my Lord!
Yeah. You could lose them. I mean, I found that problematic. I said
the dog ate them, right?
I have had that happen at the state.
I almost lost almost 50 votes. 50 signatures, and they said.
You fold it up, you stick it in a coat.
I'm in City Hall almost every day. Right. Boom, and drop it in.
All right. So we turn in our signatures on July 22nd. Posting of list of candidates. Is that and then we've got, then somebody could do all that work and decide to get out of there. They have till Thursday, August 7th. An underrated day will be Friday, August 8th. The drawing of the ballot positions.
Correct.
All right. I'd love to live stream that this year. Is that allowed?
I'd be happy to do it live. And just to be clear, so we draw names for the preliminary ballot order. In the general election, they follow state election laws with the elected incumbent first and the others following alphabetical. So yes, there will be a drawing provided we have enough candidates for preliminaries. Currently, we do seem to have enough candidates at least organized in District 3, the Belvedere District, District 7, the Acre District. We just had another candidate pull yesterday or the day before for District 8.
I had heard rumors of an Upper Highland.
So there is a third candidate. That's where you have John Dakota and Francisco Maldonado. A third gentleman has entered the race, Marcos. And I apologize to this guy. His last name is Candido. Marcos Antonio Candido Jr., I believe is his name. And he has obtained papers. And we'll see if he makes the ballot. That would trigger a preliminary in District 8 as well.
All right. I'll be reaching out to him as well. Another potential advertiser. Why are you doing a random draw in August for the preliminary, but in the general election, the rule is incumbents first, alphabetical after that? Why did the state differentiate?
So it's not the state that differentiates. It is our charter that provides for the drawing of names in preliminaries. And I'd have to clarify, be certain on this, but then generally defaults. I think the default is the state law for the election, and this is not unusual in cities.
Okay. So it's part of the city charter that's making this rule. It's not a state law that you have to follow.
I could be wrong, but yes, I think that is correct. Yes, it is a state law. It is part of our charter. Yes.
Is that specific to Lowell, to your knowledge, or is it to the Plan E charter?
I believe it might be specific to the Plan E charter. However, our old charter actually, we sort of predate Plan E, and so some of the provisions kind of got copied and pasted into the Plan E state law. Like our election commission, for instance, we're one of the first election commissions in the state. I think it's us in Cambridge. And then everybody else went and copied us in Cambridge.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Back to the election calendar. Last day to register to vote for the preliminary election, August 30th. And now the election is September 9th. So you're letting people register up to 10, 11 days before the actual voting. But the one line that jumps out, early voting TBD. To be determined. Yes. You do not have those dates yet.
Correct. We do not have those dates yet. I do expect there to be, so early voting for the in-person is optional for municipal elections. It is a vote on the city council following the recommendation of at least 50% of the election commissioners. I've met with the election commissioners multiple times. I've talked to the city councilors. There is absolutely an appetite to offer in-person early voting. I expect the election commission to be recommending a week of early voting starting on a Saturday and ending the Friday before the election, with the times, dates, and locations to be determined. It's just a matter of us really figuring out what spaces might be available. There's the question of the senior center. I do expect it. I don't imagine it not being the senior center this year. It will be relatively low impact to their operations over there. But we're kind of waiting to see how the preliminary shakes out. We might even toy with some satellite locations for early voting.
All right.
Is that on the increase, early voting?
An increase.
In other words, more people participating in that?
Well, hard to say. Hard to say how all these, yes, it makes it easier for people to vote, gives more people the opportunity to vote. I don't know that it will necessarily increase turnout. Early voting in person was available in our previous municipal in 2023 when about 7,000 people voted. So,
when does the mail-in process start?
So mail-in balloting, you may apply now. So visit mailmyballotma.com if you'd like a mail-in ballot or come in and fill out an application. As soon as the ballots are ready, we'll be mailing them to the voters. So for the preliminary, I would expect to have ballots by the second or the last week of August and immediately sending them to voters.
Okay, so but that's kind of a short turn. You're looking at a couple of week turnaround.
Very tight turnaround. It's very challenging. These deadlines on this calendar are set by statute. And when they wrote the Votes Act to provide for vote by mail, they did not also update the statutes that provided for the deadline. So cities and towns, it's a very tight turnaround. That is why I had recommended that we hold the preliminary on September 9th, and the city council accepted my recommendation. Normally it would have been held 4 weeks prior to the election, sometime in October, which would make it impractical, basically impossible to turn around the mail-in ballots.
All right, but I'm looking at Monday, September 8th. That's the day before the election. Deadline to apply for in-person absentee.
Right. The rare occasion.
How often does that happen?
More often than you'd think. So, what it is somebody has gotten the call that they have to fly out for business on Tuesday. They found out on Friday. So they call our office. It is too late to get a mail-in ballot. I actually cannot even you can't mail any ballots that haven't been applied for by that deadline. But the law still provides that people may come in and vote absentee in person in offices. And that's an old law.
Okay. So that's kind of a hybrid of in-person early voting, but it's beyond the deadline of when you can show up and vote in person early. But also, if you were to get something in the mail, it's not going to turn it around in 24 hours. Correct.
You don't mail a ballot after that. You fill all the applications received on that 5th business day prior to the election, and that applies to absentee as well. The deadline is the same.
But it makes sense.
Yeah.
And when should you mail your ballot? If you decide you want to get it in the mail, when should you mail it or come by and drop it in the
Yeah, I mean,
box?
turn it around as soon as possible. The mail in Lowell has been pretty quick, but the U.S. Postal Service continues to recommend you mail things, allowing like 7 days for things to get places. Generally, we're still seeing 2-day delivery in the city of Lowell. But turn around the ballot very quickly. The ballots do need to be received for both of these events, being municipal elections, by the close of polls.
So 8 o'clock on election night, because there's some states in the country where they're getting ballots in afterwards, and there's always been this discussion of military overseas
with
ballots,
the exception,
etc.
right? So for the preliminary, all ballots by 8 p.m. on a preliminary night. For the general election in November, 8 p.m. on election night, unless you are mailing your ballot from outside the United States of America. The ballot does have 10 extra days, as long as it was postmarked on or before Election Day, to arrive and still be counted. We actually can't release a certified result until after 15 days after the general election.
All right. And do you get a lot of this? Is it more than a handful, even in a state or presidential election?
Definitely see an increase in those overseas ballots in the lead up to a presidential. Okay,
Really?
People come out of the woodwork to vote. There are a lot of national organizations that promote voting from abroad when it comes to the presidential. I'm aware of 2 folks who spent some time in Portugal. I think they've already requested their ballots, but other than that, I wouldn't expect to see too many for this election.
Famously, back in 2000, the Bush-Gore election in Florida, people are like, wait, we got to get the overseas ballot.
Right.
And I guess there were enough to flip it.
Right, exactly. So
potentially
2000, so that has always been the state law in Massachusetts prior to the Votes Act. Those overseas ballots always had those 10 extra days. And just to be clear, that's just for state as well as city final elections. Not true for the Chelmsford town election.
Okay. Yeah, but you know what that number is. So as you sit there on election night and you post the results, you're like, all right, well, this person has a 50-vote lead, but there's only 4 ballots out
So
there.
they wouldn't make up the difference.
Okay.
Correct.
But if there's enough, you could.
Yeah. But that's for the pun. So we will not be declaring any results official until at least 15 days after the election. The media, you guys are welcome to call the race.
I got a job to do here.
Absolutely. And I understand that. I mean, the good, so we wait the 15 days, we get it certified, gives us time to canvass them, make sure they're accurate. And the good news is nobody's getting sworn into any offices till January. So.
All right. I'm going to make a personal request here to you. These early and mail-in votes, or people who show up in person early, they go into everyone was kind of under the assumption they get spread out to the different polling locations and run through their machines.
Yeah.
We found out, I think over the last couple of election cycles, that they actually get put through a special machine at Lowell City Hall.
Yeah, well, so you have the Votes Act provides for various methods to tabulate these mail-in ballots. I would expect for this municipal election, where I expect there is no vote by mail application, the state isn't soliciting everybody. I would expect us to just be sending them to the polling locations, to the precincts on election day. I assisted when I was with the Secretary of State. We did an application mailer for the 2021 elections, okay, coordinating with the city. About 5,000 people applied in the 2021 municipals. In 2023, with no application, it was fewer than 1,000 applicants. So I think about 800 ballots came back. So that is absolutely a manageable number to send to the precinct.
So this year you will not run them through a computer at City Hall?
Unless something changes, there is a deadline by which I would have to make my determination. We call that central tabulation, or advanced tabulation is what we took advantage of in the election. Processing the ballots prior to the election, securing the result, combining them at the end. But my gut tells me right now that we will just simply have a small enough volume of ballots that we'll be sending directly to precincts.
All right. So, reminder: you can get your election results pretty quickly here on InsideLowell. Always unofficial, but that was in the state election in 2024. That became an issue because you did run them at City Hall, and that was what, about 40-50% of the votes were early and/or mail-in, right?
So. Yeah, for the November election, I want to say we had we mailed about 12,000 ballots, had about 3,000 people vote in person, and with turnout of 35,000, right, it was just about 40% or so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a huge number of ballots. There are some ballots that still do go to the precinct, and those are ones that come in after, like, the cutoff that we've set. And any ballots that are received on Election Day through the drop box or mail, those have to go to the precinct to make sure the person hasn't, in the interim, shown up to vote in the precinct.
Okay, and that whole process that we just talked about with the dates and whatnot, it pretty much plays out again with early votings, new last day to register, new last day to apply for a mail-in ballot, new deadline to come in person and grab your last-minute mail-in ballot for the November election on Tuesday, November 4th, and again, to be determined on the early voting. Are you thinking the same thing though? 1 week for early in-person voting, and then you'll mail the ballots as soon as you have.
Correct, right? Seems reasonable. I don't think we could do as much as 14 days of early voting. Sometimes I've also consulted with other election directors in other municipalities. So, for instance, the city of Boston has opted into 1 week of early voting prior to their preliminary election, with times, dates, and locations to be determined based upon where they're having preliminary. So it seems reasonable and not excessive to offer a week.
All right. We're chatting with Will Rosenberry, Director of Elections here in the City of Lowell. Former Lowell Mayor Bill Samaras, as always, is our guest co-host on Wednesdays. You're tuned into the Daily Pulse on Wednesday, June 25th. Going to continue our discussion with Will, including some other things that still need to be determined in terms of where you're going to vote and how that could work. And we'll talk about how do you know you're actually on the voter list. A lot of folks assume they are, and turns out they aren't. You may be getting a piece of mail. Don't be surprised by it. It could be in your mail any day. We'll talk about that. First, let's thank all of our Daily Pulse sponsors. We start with Ray Booton. You know the dealio there. If you're looking to buy or sell a home, a business, or a commercial property, go to realestaterayBooton.com to begin the process. Thank you as well to WellPoint. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Washington Savings Bank, banking that feels like home. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell and Southern New Hampshire since 1925. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life in our communities through strategic, impactful philanthropy. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency Greater Lowell is counted on to protect its most valuable assets since 1982. And by the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City. Last-minute scheduling conflict meant we didn't do our Inside the Pirates podcast this week. We'll bring you Smoke Monday. I swear that's the name of the player. I didn't make it up. We'll bring him to you next Tuesday. Meanwhile, the Pirates on the road this Saturday night against the Quad City Steamrollers. All right. We continue our discussion with Lowell Elections Director Will Rosenberry, Bill Samaras. So polling locations. There was some undecided things. On a couple of precincts, the Senior Center and Lowell High School in particular seem to play a role, be it for Election Day voting or early voting, and then where you're going to put that ballot drop box for people who want a mail-in ballot but don't actually want to put it in the mail. They want to come drop it off in person. Right. Have you reached a verdict?
Not exactly. So the Lowell High situation continues to be fluid. Speaking with the folks over there is a temporary construction wall, and the problem with the Lowell High School was a lack of power outlets. Okay, so it's a big, huge, expansive space. It's beautiful. But for some reason, they didn't put outlets where you would assume they put outlets. So extension cords caused tripping hazards. We had to spread them out over a great distance.
So the building built 40 years ago, when there wasn't as much need for computers and laptops and voting machines and cell phone chargers, had enough outlets in the right places. The modern building did not.
Yeah, that's what it seemed to be. But there is.
I think it was in the wrong room. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a construction wall that is supposed to come down. So. I'm working with Rick Underwood over there at the schools to figure out what that space is going to be like. I plan to get in there soon again. The reality of it is Lowell High may, as a result of this construction wall, continue to be usable. Okay, now polling places are under the purview of the city council. So we did have a discussion about polling places. Some things came up. My concerns about the Lowell High School. I have concerns about the Rourke Bridge construction and how it might affect access to the collegiate charter school.
Ooh.
I've also heard from a number of voters that the collegiate is sort of difficult to find. That discussion occurred. There's also a discussion about moving the voting from the Morey School gym to the cafeteria. I viewed the space with the principal. That seems like a reasonable proposal. So I'm hopeful that at least that Morey School change happens. I plan to attend a community meeting next week about the Rourke Bridge to see what the construction impact might be over there.
What's your alternative if you can't use? If it turns out that you can't use Lowell High School, do you have a place in mind?
Yeah, there are some other spaces that are suitable. It has to in a city such as ours, it has to be in an adjacent precinct for voters to vote in it. There are a number of locations in or around those precincts that might be suitable. I've examined some university properties that might be suitable. I did visit the Stocklosa School, which could be suitable. In Ward 7 were Lowell High to become unavailable, although we'd have to relocate some Ward 4 voters who vote there. There are some other spaces available. Some of them, such as like the Masonic Hall, would incur a rental fee. But we are continuing to explore options. We're just kind of waiting for the chips to fall where they may here to see where the preliminary is and what the needs might be.
I surprisingly found out, though, that it doesn't have to be a city-owned or state-owned property. You could actually do it in a private property / private business. Some Kroger supermarkets and other states.
Correct. Actually,
hosting elections, right?
Yeah, correct. Worcester, I believe, has a polling location on election day. That's a grocery store.
Worcester.
The city of Brockton, they have held early voting at the mostly empty Westgate Mall. Okay, so yes, it does not have to be a city building. It just has to be a suitable location. However, if there's a fee incurred, of course, we'd have to pay a rental fee of some sort. But you could vote in church basements, function halls, empty storefront in theory, as long as it's accessible and suitable for a polling
And with
location.
some parking.
Actually, interestingly about parking, we love to provide parking to voters, but that is not actually a requirement of any law, except for accessible parking. There's a certain formula. You have to have at least one, and then if you provide parking, there's a formula, X spots at a more handicapped
But as a
parking.
council, that's what I might come after.
Well, yes, and as far as
Because
palatability,
that's where I'm going to get the complaint.
yes, as far as palatability, it's preferable to have parking.
Yeah.
Now, that's difficult with the schools here because school, although the students aren't there, the teachers are all there.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I examined the Lincoln School, okay? The Lincoln School, it spans 2 precincts. There's certain precincts of Ward 6 that cross over to vote at the senior center. They could have been better served by the Lincoln School, but the Lincoln School has a tiny little parking lot, and all the teachers will be there. There will be no place to park. So I think Lincoln School is kind of off the table because of that lack of palatability with no parking.
Do you also, if you were to do it in a public place, a privately owned place, or whatever, doesn't that make it harder to kind of like button it up in terms of the zones where you have to be a certain number of feet away before you're holding signs or allowed to wear a campaign button or whatever? I'm thinking in a supermarket, I'm so walking in with my campaign button. I'm just going shopping.
Sure, yeah.
I don't even want to vote. I just need my milk and cookies.
And I don't know what the arrangement, the particulars of the arrangement with that supermarket in Worcester, but yeah, I mean, the 150-foot rule would still apply regardless of what type of a location it is. So, but traditionally, I'm aware that they have used the Immaculate Conception Church has been a polling location.
That's right.
We used to use the Pine Street Fire Station, for instance. There's no parking over there, but complaints, people, whatever it is, they made the decision to move into the schools. But regardless of the space, the 150-foot rule would apply.
All right. And last question in terms of the actual voting and election day, where is that? Where do you have a preference on where you'd like to see that mail-in drop box go?
So unfortunately, I did not get any money to purchase a new ballot box for this go around here. The current box we have is good. However, it is suitable to be bolted to the ground and left unattended. The police, there is also an interest in having 24 access to that early to the ballot box. I'm not sure that we're going to have an alternative for this go around.
So you believe that box will go back in the police station lobby?
Barring some miracle where I get some money to get better ballot boxes.
But you have concerns by some people about putting it into the police station, that some people won't do not want to.
Well, so I understand that there are folks out there who believe that having to enter a police station to cast your ballot is a burden, and I share that concern.
It's out there.
Right. I mean, it is a concern, and I don't know if it's preventing people from voting, but maybe more people would use a drop box if it wasn't. It is not a recommended practice to have the ballot box in any police station.
So for those who have that concern, though, you can drop it in the mailbox, try to do it 7 days ahead of time, or you can go to City Hall.
You can walk it into my office, correct, and hand deliver it. There is also a slot in the door on City Hall, not really designed for ballots, but if it were to end up in the treasurer's box, we will also get it as well. So,
all right. Can I just, because sometimes I can't help myself and I have to be a dick. So I'm trying to understand this logic. You don't want to go vote in the police station because of the presence of police, right? There's no other reason for it. Let's be honest.
How about this? I got a warrant. I'm recognizable, and I've been smoking weed. I don't want to walk into a police station, but I want to vote.
So when I show up on election day, what do I see at every polling location?
You do see, there are police officers.
I see police multiple in some, right?
Sure. Yeah. and that's
that's my editorial comment. Yeah. I have to be a dick once an episode. So.
I mean, those that have brought up the issue have raised the station itself.
Right. And let me tell you, there are advocates out there who would like to see the police out of polling places. In fact, they changed the law for the appointment of police officers because they were concerned about, I suppose, the political bent of the police officers that might be appointed. It used to be just strictly under the purview of the chief of police or his designee, but now it involves city councils and select boards.
I mean,
all in the interest of getting more people to vote, and every year fewer and fewer people vote. Yeah. All right, enough editorializing. We had a story on InsideLowell. You guys sent out a press release from the city. Confirmation cards were sent out. I registered to vote. Why do I need to confirm that I'm registered to vote, Mr.
Sure.
Rosenberry?
So it's not necessarily confirming that you're registered to vote, but you're confirming your current residence. So state law requires, so all 351 cities and towns do this. State law requires that we conduct what we call the annual census. Gather the folks, ascertain who is currently residing in our municipalities. So in January, we did do a mailer. A listing of residents went out to each household, giving folks the opportunity to respond. We asked people to respond within 10 days. The legal deadline is April 15th. So anybody who did not respond and say that, yes, I live here, or no, I don't live here, you could go either way, then the law requires that we put you on the inactive voters list. The concern being, you haven't told us you live in Lowell, perhaps you no longer live here. For a municipal election, you have to live here in order to vote. State elections, there's a 6-month grace period.
All right. So even if I showed up and voted on the first Tuesday in November, I believe it was on November 6th this past year, whatever the date was, if I do not fill out my form in the town of Chelmsford in January or February, whenever it's sent out, I could be removed from the voter roll.
So it's not that you're removed from the voter roll. You're made inactive, okay? So now you're inactive. Our concern being that you no longer live in Massachusetts or no longer live in Lowell. So we need to establish that before you vote. So if you are inactive, if you remain inactive on election day, you have to show identification showing your current Lowell address, as well as fill out an affirmation of current and continuous residence. It can cause lines.
All right. So you're not removed from the voter roll per se, but if you show up on election day, you will not be able to vote. You have to do you got to go through the rigmarole. Ballot.
Well, not provisional ballot,
which I had to do in Chelmsford, by the way.
Right. I want to be an inactive voter is still a registered voter. We're just concerned that they might not meet the residency requirements, so we need to establish that. So what folks are receiving in the mail this week? It's a small 4 1/4 by 6 postcard. You can tear it off. It's got a postage prepaid reply card. I encourage folks who receive this to turn it around and return it to my office, check the appropriate box and sign it so that they can get activated for the election and not have to go through that rigmarole.
All right. Because if you receive one of those cards, you're going to have a more difficult time voting on election day or even requesting a mail-in ballot, right?
Correct. Well, not requesting the mail-in ballot. Once, because you're asserting that you meet the requirement when you apply for your mail-in ballot, but voting in person can cause difficulty. And, if you fail to respond to the census and you are made inactive and then you remain inactive for 2 federal elections, that is when you would be deleted from the voters list.
Okay. And how do you kind of the old purge the voter roll? Does the city of Lowell do that periodically? And if so, what's that What's that time frame?
Yes. We did do a mass delete, so-called, of voters following the presidential election in November. So that being a federal election, anybody who had been inactive in the years prior and failed to vote in the 22 and 24 had become eligible for deletion as a result of failure to vote again in 24. So we did a mass delete then. So we did the mass inactivation on or around June 1st to get those cards out to folks as well.
Okay. And that's actually a significant process and number. If I remember correctly, with the discussions with your predecessor, there was like one election where they ended up quote unquote trimming or purging, whatever number you want to use, like 10,000 plus, but maybe even more. But then as the confirmation cards or whatever went out, a lot of those got put back on. That's time consuming though, right? For your office?
Oh yeah, so it's a lot of work to conduct the census and and the confirmation card, a lot of data entry required with that. Next year I hope to have a more enhanced census where we're just about to finalize get started on the rolling out an online response option. I plan to put in at least an introductory letter as well, explaining what this is, why it's important, and why you need to respond. But hopefully, in the 2026 census, we'll get a much better response on that first mailing. Is my goal.
All right. You told me off air before we were kind of chatting, waiting for former Mayor Samaras to arrive, and you said City of Lowell has not actually done a proper census in a while. What do you mean by that?
So, the records that I have available, and also being a resident and a voter in the City of Lowell, my observation, the records seem to kind of stop in 2018. So I'm working to bring us in compliance. After this census, we are, for instance, required to print what's called the annual street listing. It's a listing of residents. Yeah. The last book on my shelf is from 2018, so we're going to be printing some back copies of that for the years that I have the data available.
At that time, we were part of the national census, so
well, this is all related to the annual census. So, national census is a completely separate thing. But there
was a lot of work tied into the city at that time.
Yeah, the city was definitely involved with re-precincting and redistricting and the census and all that. But this is just a result of this. And the word census is funny because under the law, when I'm talking about the annual census, is really the annual street listing. But I'm making sure that we're following the calendar of events. For instance, in 2023, our census arrived the day or 2 days after it was supposed to have arrived, and it actually was arriving the day of the second round. The confirmation cards were supposed to arrive. I'm working on bringing into compliance this year, getting some good data on what you get back when you do it in compliance, and then let's do it even better next year is my goal.
So basically, people should know your office, you're working hard during election time, but there's no downtime because
correct. There is
the rest of the year you're bringing all the little pieces together.
No, it's a lot of work
to make a puzzle.
I did 15 years of radio and didn't really understand how much work into it until I started talking more and more to Greg Pappas. But some of this stuff, and now I'm learning even more stuff from you. It's a full-time department job. Do you have enough staff to do the elections the way you would like to do them and the way you should to make sure they're kind of done properly?
Yeah, they have staffed up the office. Kudos to Greg for getting some more staff members in there. So we've got a good, a well-staffed office. Could I use more folks? Yes. Do I get more folks? Also true. Yes. So we do bring in some extra help for election day. We've got poll workers that we bring in to assist with the processing of these ballots and stuff. Luckily the city's been very accommodating, so we're able to basically staff up when we need to. We got it done last year without having to really call in too many extra resources.
I think as a former candidate, I think you have some pretty good people there because there was never a problem getting questions answered, okay? Mm-hmm. Or if you brought in the sheets to be verified and what have you. Turnaround time was excellent. So the thing is, I found a lot of the people that worked in the office to be very dedicated.
Yeah, very dedicated staff in there.
It was important to them.
And I'm not trying to knock on the former directors of election. Everybody did their job and did what they needed to do, But it's been a long time since we've had somebody in the role for a long period of time, and not everybody who has been in that role has had my background.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yes. The state law governs a lot of this stuff, from the timelines to signatures. There was something else we discussed off there. You said a lot of the things that are being done are kind of like remnants of days of polling taxes and this kind of stuff. Could you kind of please explain that?
Yeah, well, we were talking about there is some legislation, either a bill pending or being proposed to decouple the census from voting. So basically, we wouldn't be making people inactive because they failed to respond to the census. And what we were talking about is, interestingly enough, I've been educated on that. Yeah, the annual street listing, my understanding is the origins of that are to make sure that it was a poll tax, that people had paid their poll taxes. They've amended the statute over the years, so it's just a matter of your residency, your name, date of birth, your occupation, and your nationality, and not a citizen. So I mean, there's a proposal. It would have to wend its way to the legislature. And I think you still have to purge the voters list and make people inactive. They would be proposing an alternative for that.
All right. How do folks know if folks are hearing us talk about, well, if you didn't respond, you may have been taken off? One way to know for sure that you're inactive is you're getting a confirmation card. But there is a website where no matter where you live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you can find everything from your status right down to where you must go to vote on election day.
Yeah. So if folks visit voteinma.com, that'll take you right to the Secretary of State's website. Among the tools they have on there is you can search and verify your voter registration. And it will also inform you of your status. If you are inactive and you have not for some reason received the postcard, it got lost in the mail or whatever, you threw it away, there are other opportunities to activate yourself. Visit my website, lowellma.gov/elections. Click on annual census on the left-hand side, and you can obtain a form that you can sign and turn into my office. Other ways to become active is by signing a nomination paper or applying to vote by mail. So every name we certify on a nomination paper, if they were inactive, they become active as a result.
Okay. But you always advise people just check to see before you make that trip.
Absolutely.
To the vote. Just check your status and do it before the election.
Do it before the election. You know, the other thing in a city such as ours, people move around a lot. So you might be registered to vote, but you might not be registered to vote at your current address. So I encourage everybody to go online, voteinma.com, look for the link to check your registration, check it, verify that it's correct, because you can still vote if you've moved within the city of Lowell, but we're going to have to send you to the other side of the city.
All right.
And I think that's difficult because, being at the high school, I mean, I had students, they lived in Pawtuckaville. Then 4 months later, they're living, in the Highlands. And then I've seen 2 or 3 or 4 movements within the city.
Right, and we've had people who showed up to vote at the Riley School in Belvedere, but it's 7:45 p.m. They're still on the list in Pawtuckaville. Oh. It's tough to get there by 8 p.m.
It takes 2 hours, I've heard.
Right, so I mean, check your registration, make sure it's current, make sure you're going to the correct polling location.
All right, and one last thing, though, as if this isn't confusing enough, if you vote by mail, let's say I'm such a fan of Bill Samaras as a counselor and a mayor that I voted for him, and then he came on this podcast and said something that really pissed me off. I can change my mind. Can I not? As long as I do.
Have you returned your ballot in this scenario, Ted?
I have mailed the ballot in. Yes.
So once we receive your ballot and check it in, you are deemed to have voted. So unfortunately, there's no takesies, backsies once you have submitted your ballot.
Okay, because now this goes back. Oh God, I think it was Etta Magic at the time. I thought I remember you could go, and as long as it hasn't been run through the machines.
So that might be the old law. Yes, under the old law, you were not deemed to have voted until you're checked off on the vote. So we didn't have a central tabulation, so all the ballots would go to the polling place. So until the time your ballot got to the polling place, you could beat your ballot, check in, then your mail-in ballot or your absentee would get there and be rejected. But when they created the vote-by-mail system with the Votes Act in 2022, they determined that once you place your ballot, once you hand it to the local election official or put it in a drop box or put it in the mail, you have voted.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad. That seemed like a real weird technicality. How about I request a mail-in ballot, but I'm like, you know what? I don't know where I put it. I don't, whatever. Can I come vote in person?
Yes. Until we have received your ballot, you may come and vote in person.
All right. So
And there are plenty of people who did that, who requested ballots, and what a waste of money it was for them ultimately to just wanted to, for a preview or whatever, but to come in and vote in person. Yeah.
all right, if I don't think my ballot's going to get there in time, because you can track your ballot too and see if you voted.
Correct.
Well, I wake up on election day, my ballot has not arrived yet, and I'm now worried that my vote's not going to count. I show up to the polling location, I can vote.
Correct.
Right?
Yep. Correct.
All right, what if my ballot comes in the mail?
It subsequently arrives in the mail. So any ballot that comes in the mail on election day is going to the precinct. So we will have seen that Ted Panos checked in.
Okay.
And then reject that mail-in ballot.
All right.
Alternatively, if it came in like right at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. and we didn't have time to send it to the precinct, we don't count it until after the voters list comes back from the precinct. So I'd look at the list, see Ted already voted in person, reject that mail-in.
So there are processes in place
Correct.
for those
Of
who
course.
are concerned about
Very
these things.
simple process. Just simple, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a safe, secure system. I mean,
Amazing.
I've always found show up and put the ballot in the thing. So that's I wait and I look to I want to see that counter add one from where it was before. To me, that's
Well, in
how
Lowell, it
everybody
adds
knows.
3 in a presidential election because we've got 3 cards. So, be advised if we're having a state election with multiple card ballots, that count on the machine is not accurate.
Oh yeah. So how many pages will this ballot be? Because you've got the 8 districts.
Yeah, I'm hopeful it's just a 1-page ballot. I mean, even if we had a ballot question or ballot questions, they would need to be translated trilingually. But it's not until you get into 3 or 4 questions on a ballot when you're going to a second card in the city of Lowell. We are unique in Massachusetts. We are the only trilingual ballot community. There are other bilingual communities, but we are the only one with 3 languages on our ballot. We have some additional challenges here in Lowell. We might not be the last, but we are the first and the only right now.
All righty. Interesting stuff. So when will the TBDs on this, when do you expect to go in front of the election commission and then the city council and have these become determined?
That is hard to say, and I am drawing a blank on the deadline. You could determine in-person early voting as late as 5 days prior to its start. Okay, so I do not expect to go that late.
You don't strike me as the kind of guy who wants to.
My hope is that we get this resolved in the next month. Now that we are getting a better idea of who's going to make the ballot, where the preliminaries are going to be, I'm sort of interested in perhaps if we were to have a preliminary in like Belvedere and the Acre, maybe we do a Saturday at the Riley, a Saturday at the Senior Center or the Stocklosa School. If it ends up being District 8, maybe we open up the Daily School on a Saturday. So, I want to make it easy and convenient for people to vote, and I think we make the decision in July. I think we'll have a good plan.
All right, but as of right now, there is not enough candidates have pulled paperwork to create an at-large primary.
That is correct.
If one more school committee at-large candidate pulls and returns, you will have.
That is correct. Right now we have 4 declared candidates for school committee. It's an elect 2 at-large, if more than twice, so 5 makes it a preliminary.
So, say for instance, Jackie Doherty, the incumbent, who has yet to show up to pull paperwork.
Correct.
If she does pull, you now have to have an at-large preliminary for school committee. That means you have to open up every single polling location, even though there's no preliminary in Pawtucketville.
Right.
You have to open it all up.
That's correct. And then you have the additional communications challenge of, in Belvedere and Ward 3, you've got both an at-large school committee as well as your district city council. But in District 2, you just have the at-large school committee. Your councilor's not on the ballot. So there is a communications piece there that will have to be dealt with. I don't think that we haven't had a scenario like that since we've gone to the district system, I don't believe. So, we're going to see where it goes. And we'll do our best.
I'm rooting for it. Nothing personal.
And honestly, I don't mind. I mean, I think it gives an opportunity to get people educated and to answer those questions about the why and continue the conversation and get people better educated about our hybrid system. So.
All right. It's thank you for coming on. It really is amazing how complicated this is. For most voters, you show up on election day and you cast, or now you show up early or mail.
Yeah.
But for those of you behind the scenes who do it,
it takes a lot of work.
There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just
do it right.
It's not. These elections are not just run willy-nilly. There is a reason, precedent, and law behind everything that you do.
Correct.
Right?
That is correct. And that's kind of my thing. I've been administering elections in Massachusetts for a long time. I'm not a lawyer, but I know the laws very well. Helped a lot of election officials, examined a lot of different scenarios, and helped people solve a lot of problems. I absolutely want to bring those skills to Lowell. I want to get turnout up. I want to increase our communication that comes out of our office. You've seen a press release come out of my office almost monthly. Yep. I intend to maintain that level of communication. I want to bring more people. I want to be out there and educating folks on the process. So,
all right. Good luck this election season. I'm sure you'll be sick of seeing my phone pop up on you.
Not at all, Teddy, because you're one way to get the word out. So, yeah.
I'll warn you.
All right. Before I sign off, former Mayor Samaras, any thoughts on Lowell High School last night?
Interesting meeting last night, but requires more than 2 minutes to talk about it.
Do you think that 40? Yeah, we're gonna do future shows on this. Do you think that 40 million is the final number? And if not, will it be higher or lower?
I think at this point, it has to be a final number, and I think the contractors realize that, and the amount was over 40 million.
It's 47,
47
2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah. Well, it was hovering between 42 and 47, but it was going higher and higher, and then I think they thought well of this at this particular point, and they knew. They knew they had a problem anyways, but I think they came in with a price that they can live with or will have to live with at this point.
All right. More to come on future Daily Pulse podcast with Mayor Samaras, both Lowell High and Markley. That Markley discussion became sneaky good last night. It was very intriguing, and I've been warning the environmentalists out there. AI is going to destroy your movement. You're going to get ditched so quickly, your head will spin. And we saw a trace of that last night play out in the city of Lowell.
I was part of the vote that brought in Markley, and the thing is, and the promises that they made. But I envision there are some houses that are very close, and at some point they're going to have to buy the houses out.
Yep.
Okay, offer a...
That's how I see it ending.
I don't see it. I do not see it any other way.
All right. We'll talk more about that with Mayor Samaras. Will Rosenberry, again, thank you for coming on in. Look forward to future conversations. Thank all of you for tuning in today on the Daily Pulse as well, the show that keeps its finger on the pulse of Lowell and the world around it. Tomorrow, I'll tell you the show, we're going to call it The Decision 2. Remember LeBron James's decision back in... It was 2010 when he left the Cavaliers for the first time. We've got a decision tomorrow that we're going to bring you. Tune in for that. Friday, Leslie Boder will join us. Next week, I'm only doing a couple of shows because I want to take some time. I'm going to head down to the Cape with the family for the 4th of July. But we'll keep you entertained as always here on the Daily Pulse. Remember, it drops every day at noon on InsideLowell.com, YouTube, and our social media. Till next time, everybody stay safe, stay cool, and we'll catch you on the other side.